You have to really get your past clear. You have to get out of it. You have to get out of the wake. You know, the wake is the trail that is left behind, right? The wake doesn't drive the boat. It's just a trail that's left behind. It's an illusion to believe that the things that happened to you in your past are the reason why your life isn't working today. You can go to therapy for the rest of your life and analyze it and figure it all out, but it still all happened. And in a universe in which there's an intelligent system guiding every single aspect of it, every mosquito, every snail, all of the passageways inside of your body, and all of the glorious ways that the planets all align with each other. There's one force in the universe that's flowing through everything, that there's no mistakes in it. And I think for me, two things really happened that I really strongly urge you, before you go any further, before we go any further here, is to really examine the wake of your life and to understand that it's just a trail that is left behind, and to let it go and merge yourself into the present moment, which is where God is. God isn't going to be doing anything different an hour from now than God is doing now. And God isn't doing anything different right now than God was doing an hour ago. So that God is all there is now. Just now. And any time you are not here now, you are away from God. And any time you are away from being at peace, you have sent God out of your life. So connecting on a spiritual level, on an energy level, which I'll go into great depth later, is really removing yourself from your past. I've written about this in a book a few years ago called You'll See It When You Believe It. But for me, the real turning point in my life came when I was able to finally, once and for all, practice this thing called forgiveness. There's a Chinese proverb that says if you're going to pursue revenge, you'd better dig 2 graves. And of course, Mark Twain's famous line about forgiveness. Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. On the heel that has crushed it. And I tell you this, and I say this to you because, not to elicit any sympathy, because in my way of looking at the world, and all of the writing that I have been doing this past quarter of a century, and particularly in the last year with the spiritual solution to every problem, I have come to a very serious awareness that everything in the wake had to happen, and the evidence for it is that it did. That's the evidence. That's all the evidence you really need. And if you'll just stop for a moment, and this is a little weird, and I'll point it out, but in a universe which is endless, in which there is no such thing as time, in which there are no beginnings and no ends, and in which we are all infinite souls, there is an infinite number of times that we can be here, incarnated in any number of ways, endlessly. I mean, when you think of no beginnings and no ends, that used to be one of the hardest things for me to do when I was a child. And it still is when I really contemplate it. The idea of being dead for 1,000,000 years is not a problem. Is it for you? 1,000,000 years? You say, all right, I can wait it out. I'll just be dead anyway. But forever? Like another 1,000,000 and another 1,000,000 and then 4 billion more, and you haven't even gotten started yet on how long you're going to be dead. The endlessness of it all, the infinity of it all, the no beginnings and no ends, the no boundaries of it all, is almost too startling to comprehend when we are coming from our egos, which have beginnings and ends. So that who's to say, do you know who the most influential person in my life was? The person who has allowed me to come here and to speak about these things on these tapes and on this program? The person who has allowed me to write and express and experience the kinds of things that I've experienced, and to grow in a spiritual dimension. You know who the most influential person in my life was? My father. This man who walked out when I was born. This man who had absolutely nothing to do with me, and the only reason I went to his grave was to find out if my name was on the death certificate. That's all I wanted to know. Did he even acknowledge in death that he had a son named Wayne? And he did. But who's to know that God and Melvin Lyle Dyer, before he incarnated in 1915, had a conversation. And God said to him, "What do you want to do in this trip around?" And he said, "I'd like to teach one person forgiveness. So I'll go there and I'll just be an asshole." And that's what I'm signing up for. And there'll come a time when my youngest son will have to forgive me. And in the process of doing that, he will teach millions of others. Who knows? Who's to say? God's one and only voice's silence means that God is that which is indivisible. There is no place that God is not. And you can't divide God up and say that God is on this side or God is on that side. I've often said that God isn't doing anything different now than God was doing an hour ago or 100 years ago. And God isn't doing anything different now than he will be doing 1,000 years from now. God is exclusively here and now, not elsewhere, not in heaven someplace apart from us, but here, now, and indivisible. And the word indivisible is very important, because that which is everywhere and cannot be separated or carved up is something that we have a great deal of difficulty in the world of the physical form experiencing and understanding. Because our world, the world of you listening here, is a world of dichotomies. It's a world of paradoxes. We divide everything up. And dichotomies are just our way of being. We divide everything in the world up. The only reason we know that something called darkness exists is because of light. If there was nothing called light, we wouldn't know anything called darkness. The only reason we have a concept called up is because we have something of its reverse called down. You've never seen a person with a front who doesn't have a back. You've never seen a person with an outside who doesn't have an inside. We divide everything. Everything is in the world of the divisible. In the Bhagavad Gita, it speaks about transcending the dichotomies, figuring out a way to get past the up-down, the male-female, the good-bad, the right-wrong, the old, the new, the alive and the dead. Everything has its dichotomy. You can always find its opposites. In fact, that's how the symbolism of language is created, through having opposites. We don't know about oneness in the physical world. Everything has its counterpart, its dichotomy, except for silence. Silence is the only experience that is the same as God. It is indivisible. You take silence, and we'll have some right now, and now let's just cut that in half. And what do we have? More silence. Let's take what we've cut in half and cut it in half again and again. And endlessly you attempt to divide into a dichotomy, silence, but you can never do it, because silence is indivisible. And silence is God's one and only voice. When you go into silence, you go into the place where you make conscious contact with God, whatever it is that God means to you. you make conscious contact with that omnipotent, omniscient force in the world, that omnipresence of God. And the reason I say that it's not crowded along the extra mile is because the mile that most people are on is a very, very noisy mile. And I encourage young people to become more comfortable with silence. We live in a world of bulldozers and leaf blowers and trucks that make endless amounts of noise and chatter. And constantly, I have a home, a place a retreat that I go to frequently on Maui. And oftentimes I will walk in the morning and they're in a big building project in Maui. And I'll go past one building after another and start to count the noisemakers as all of these machines and all of these people who are trying to make the place look so pristine and so beautiful and so landscaped, instead of just letting it grow, just letting it be. Silence and God are one because you can't divide either one of them, okay? So that going to silence as frequently as you can and understanding that out of silence, everything is created. The words that you are listening to right now as I speak emerge from silence. That silence is the source. And it's the source that is what we want to make conscious contact with. Like the source of all light is the sun. And the only reason we know about light is because of something called darkness. But when you go to the source can't be divided.
What are your visions of yourself? You see, all of this business about if you get tired, how many of you get tired? You don't have to get tired. I don't get tired. When it's time to go to sleep, there's no insomnia in my life, and there doesn't have to. Insomnia is one more of those things where you start telling yourself, I'm not going to be able to sleep. Look, you've been out, you're partying, you're at a convention, you're in New Orleans, get into bed, let's say, and it's 2 o'clock, and you know you got to get up at 6. You look at your watch. All right, it's 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock? 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock? 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I were to fall asleep right this second, and I'm not even close, all right, I'd only get 4 hours of sleep. Here it comes, ready? Great imagery now. Boy, am I going to be tired tomorrow. Whew! Oh, I'm going to be tired. That'll keep you awake for at least an hour, all right? Your body just kind of goes, oh my God, and you start interfering with it. Your mind starts programming you, all right? Now, an hour later, you look at your watch and say, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. 3 hours. Now you upgrade your neurotic expectations for yourself. I'm going to be a zombie tomorrow. And then when you get out of bed and the alarm goes off, if you sleep, what do? You start counting backwards now. 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. You put your body instantly on droop. Kind of put your eyes sort of on bag. Don't expect anything out of me today. I didn't get any sleep last night or whatever. Until someone comes along halfway through the day and says, you know, we got a game tonight and we're going to go out and have a few drinks and we're going to, hey, that's great. Yeah, I think I'd like to do that. It's a choice. You ever notice how tired you get when you got something unpleasant to do? You know, you look at the lawn equipment and look at the roller and the edger. I'm going to lie down for 3 or 4 months. I'm really tired. It's a choice. If you just tell yourself, I don't need to think tired thoughts. When I tell you that the kind of visualization I'm talking about can end asthma, asthma is an easy one. Anybody who's suffered with asthma, and I've had a stepson who's had it, he holds on to it and he believes it and he wants to hang on to it, and that's it. He's going to have asthma until he doesn't want it anymore. And I tell him that and he just gets mad because he wants to hold on to his asthma. And he gets a lot of attention for it, and he gets a lot of people to remind him that he's sickly and that he can't do this and do that. And so he gets a lot of positive sort of affirmation for his negative reaction. I have seen people eliminate a lot more than asthma. When people ask me, what kind of a therapist are you? Where do you fit in? Are you a behaviorist? Are you a rational emotive therapist? Are you Freudian psychoanalyst? I call myself a do-do therapist. And I really mean that. A do-do therapist is someone who believes in the great secrets of the universe. One of the great secrets that you'll read in Icus is that I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. And not one moment before. Not one of you who knows how to swim by watching somebody else do it or listening to somebody else give you instruction. You know how to swim because you got in the water and you flop around and you fill your mouth up a few times and then eventually you do. And you know something? What do you think is the difference in your physical skills between the moment before when you couldn't swim and the moment afterwards when you did let go and could swim for the first time? You think your physical skills are any different? They're exactly the same. We all know how to swim. Now you believe you can. And when you believe you can, you just do it. You just do it. And if you can't ride a bicycle, there's a woman who came to me and said, I can't ride a bicycle. My parents wouldn't let me. My mother would never let me get on a bicycle when I was a little kid. And I had these big white teeth, and she was afraid I would break them. And I said, okay, that's great. Let's go. She said, go? Where are we going? She wanted to sit in the office. I said, I've got a bicycle downstairs in the garage, and we'll just go on, and I'm going to teach you how to ride a bike. You think I'm paying these kind of prices to come here and have you teach me how to ride a bicycle? I want to know why I can't. He said, oh, well, you didn't say that. That'll take another 30 seconds. You can't because you never got on one. And as soon as you do, and are willing to fail and fall down a few times, then you'll know how to ride it. And until that, you can blame Mama forever. But it isn't going to change a thing. If you want to change something in your life, if you want to quit smoking, you don't need to go to the shit clinic. You don't need to go and poke holes in your cigarettes, so you get a hernia, trying to get that nicotine down into your lungs, and a little bit less each time. And they have now a thing out called poo-poo spray. I don't know if you've seen this, but it smells like poo-poo, all right? And you spray it on your fingers so that every time you go, oh, I don't want, no, I won't be having any of those today, no. Now, you don't have to do that. What you do is, the first thing you do is you see yourself as an ex-smoker. You just see that. You visualize yourself there, and you take credit for having such a wonderful picture of yourself. You do that first. And then the second thing you do is you tell yourself how easy this is going to be. This isn't hard. There's nothing difficult about quitting smoking. You just do it. You just don't put cigarettes in your mouth one day at a time. That's what you do. And you don't tell yourself, I'm going to want them, I'm going to get fat, and all of these kind of, you don't do that. You stop the blame. And you do it. You want to lose weight. You see yourself looking the way you want to look instead of go on a diet. Everybody I know on a diet is fat. And if you change the way you see yourself, then when you've eaten enough, you stop. You just see yourself in a different way. You stop that. No, I don't want any more. You say, I think I'll exercise a little more. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do some kind of exercise. I'm going to walk. I'm going to get myself on an exercise bike. I'm going to go to a dance class. I see myself this way. Now I'm just going to act out on that instead of saying, oh, it's so hard to quit. It's just so hard to lose weight. I'm so depressed. I think I'll have some candy as soon as I get over that, And I had a person come up to me after a talk one time and said, Dr. Dyer, you mean to tell me you never get depressed, ever? I said, of course not. She said, oh, that's depressing. Oh, that depresses me even more. You see, it depends on how you see yourself.
My sister-in-law, Marilyn, was driving on the Lodge Freeway in Detroit with her husband, my brother, and their 3 children in the back seat. Now, she is a hardcore, linear, left-brain skeptic. I mean, you had to show me. Otherwise, it doesn't exist for her. Medicine was her model. Anything that has to do with the mind, very skeptical. This car jumped the guardrail on the other side, on the southbound lane, and landed right in her face at 60 miles an hour. She saw the wheels coming and land right there. Every bone in her face was broken. Her kidneys were punctured. She had internal bleeding and was in intensive care for 13 weeks. They took her into the hospital unconscious. And no one thought that she was going to survive the night. She was really in bad shape. And they performed surgery on her for 14 hours. And there was a team of surgeons, 6 of them. And they were talking during the surgery. As you can imagine, for 14 hours you would be talking. My sister-in-law reported to me in 1971, when I was 31 years old, and just sort of starting on this path, that she watched the entire surgery. She said, Wayne, you're the only person, you're the only weird one in the family. All right? And you're weird enough to believe this, you know. So anyway, Marilyn said to me, Wayne, she said, what happened is that I left my body. And she said, I went up to the corner of the room. I was surrounded by this light, and I was in the presence of God. It was like a consciousness. It was like, I can't describe it because it doesn't have boundaries. It didn't have form, but it was a magnificent light. And I was there, and there was this tunnel. And I could have gone through this tunnel, and I had the choice, and it was so peaceful, and it felt so good. It was the most blissful I've ever been in my life. And she said, and I watched the surgeons performing on me, and I watched them working on my body, knowing that that wasn't me. When she came out of it after 14 hours of surgery, there were 2 of the surgeons, they were voting on whether they should continue this or not, or whether they should just pull the plug. She had very little heartbeat at all, and she was so badly punctured internally, and her bleeding was so bad, and there was infection and so on, that they just didn't think she would, and if she did survive, they thought it was. So 2 of them were saying, let's just give up on this, you know, and go on to other people. The 4 doctors prevailed, who said that we really believe that we can save this person. And Marilyn then made it. She had 3 little children. My 2 nephews and 1 niece were in the backseat. They were just little children at the time, 2, 4, and 5. And Marilyn decided that she could re-enter, even though it was painful and didn't want to do it. She was given, it's like given the choice. And she went back. And when she came out of it, she told the surgeons which ones had said, let's give up on it, and which ones had said, let's stay with it. And she had gave them word for word what they had said in this event. And she said, it was at that time that I became really, truly aware. And she said, since then, she has gotten to meet some of what they call NDEers, near-death experiences. And that everybody who has this near-death experience, Raymond Moody writes about it, has the same thing to report. And that is that when they come back, and they do it reluctantly, they have what we call the big picture. And since then, I mean, you wouldn't believe my sister-in-law. She is the calmest, most loving, easiest going. You can't get to her. You can't get to her. She has an inner candle flame that never flickers, though the worst goes before her. And the worst is my brother. And he goes before her all the time. And he's very linear. He's an insurance, he's a wonderful, loving, beautiful person. All of his stuff is motivated out of caring and concern. He wants to always, but he wants to do so damn much that it becomes like, all right, enough, I got the map. All right, yeah, but do you know which turn to make? Yeah, I know. And it's half an hour of that kind of. And she just sits there and just reads. And when there's a family squabble and people get themselves all upset, she just picks up a book and just excuses herself. And she goes over into the corner, and the kids say, you know, when someone will be around, their friends, they say, what's with your mom? And they all say, oh, she's got the big picture. It's like having the big picture. And these people, all of them report when they come back from that, they have this like near-death experience. It's like tension and stress and anxiety and fear and all of that stuff that occupies so much of our lives is just gone. It's just not a part of the consciousness any longer. My suggestion is that we don't have to have that kind of traumatic event happen to our form to understand the universal principles and to surrender to them and to make them work every day in our life. That we don't have to go there. That we can unmuddle all of this metaphysical psychobabble, jargons kind of stuff and begin to live the spiritual life and have the understanding that we are truly spiritual beings having a human experience, and that the quality of that human experience is only available to us through our thoughts, through our mind, through our divine connection. And that whatever your religious belief, whatever label you place on yourself, try not to think of yourself as Christian. Try to be Christ-like, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Try not to think of yourself as Jewish, but be Jehovah-like, or Buddha-like, or Mohammed-like. These were not people who were asking anyone to deify idols and wooden deities and an orthodoxy. But instead we're talking about kindness and love and forgiveness and gentleness and spirit, and that we're all connected, and you begin to live that way. And it's really quite an easy thing to do.
Spiritual is a way of being. It is a lesson that most people haven't learned, because we think of things as religious as being spiritual. To be spiritual to me means to be connected to the source from which all things emanate. And that doesn't just mean that you go around and do things in a positive, religious, nice way. It means that you are spiritually connected on a vibrational level. So that if you look at the source from which all things come, and if you had magical binoculars that you could just sort of tune into and see what it looks like and what it feels like and what it sounds like. What it sounds like this. It says, this source says, I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. What it looks like love, it looks like kindness, and mostly it excludes no one and no thing. And so when you have an organization or a thought that excludes some and includes others, which is what almost all organized religion does, it really deviates from the source energy that I'm speaking about here, because source energy and spiritual are the same. So that every thought that we have that says, I get it but you don't, I'm better than you are, I'm number one and you're number two, you live on that side of the river, I live on this side of the river, therefore I am entitled to something and you're not. Anything that excludes is non-spiritual. So all we have to do is think, one of the great teachers in India many, many years ago, around the time of Christ, even before, was a man named Patanjali. And he said these words about spirituality. He said, "When you are steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm directed towards yourself or others, all living creatures will cease to feel fear in your presence." So all you have to do is be steadfast. That's what the great spiritual masters all gave us. It's like when people ask me, well, are you a spiritual man? I say, I fluctuate. There are times when I just am the most giving and loving and creative and kind and focused on God human being as I can be. But there are other times when I lose it. There are times when I get frustrated. There are times when I possibly think of myself as having accomplished so many things, so my ego gets in the way and so on. But when you're steadfast and you never have thoughts that separate yourself from others, and when you never exclude anyone, and when you are no longer having thoughts of harm of any kind, and that means thoughts of judgment directed towards yourself or others, then all living creatures, and that's why St. Francis, for example, would have living creatures would no longer feel anger or hatred in his presence.
Can you one day get to the level where you don't fluctuate any longer?
Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. I mean, that's just right out of the scriptures that all of us have within us, because there's not a human being on this planet who isn't connected to Source. The fact that, when you go to bed tonight and you look at your fingernails, you know that tomorrow morning they're going to be just a little bit longer than they were the night before. But you don't go to bed and say, I got to really work on these fingernails. I got to grow them tonight, and I got to beat my heart, and I got to grow my hair, and I've got to digest my food. There's a force, there's a source in the universe that is doing all of this for you, and all of us came from that source. And then we forgot. We forgot, and we took on these egos, and these egos say that who I am is what I have and what I do and what other people think of me, and who I am is separate and better than other people and separate from God. All you have to do, you see, Course in Miracles puts it this way. It says that being spiritual is not about learning new things. It's about remembering. So it goes like this: the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. A mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is who you are, for you must be as God created you. And then it says, be done with this madness and return to the quiet remembrance of God. It's just about remembering. It's about going back to where you came from, living from that perspective, imagining what that source is like, seeing it as a vibration and energy, and reaching for thoughts that vibrate more in harmony with that energy. That's all it takes.